KAFP members, their families, and colleagues to assume a sense of global responsibility and to encourage service to others. As you learn about Dr. Stephens, I am confident you will see why he is the recipient of our 2019 Kansas Humanitarian Award. Dr. Stephens has been involved with international service for his entire career, starting with a rotation in medical school to Kibogora Hospital in Rwanda in 1989. This rotation was a key life event for Dr. Stephens, as it led to his choice to pursue family medicine. Following residency, Dr. Stephens spent 2 years in practice in Olathe before returning to Rwanda to serve as a full-time medical missionary for 8 years. Returning to Kansas in 2002, Dr. Stephens continued to meet the needs of our underserved patients in his hometown of Mineola, while also precepting KU medical students on their rural rotations. In 2007, Dr. Stephens joined the resident faculty at Via Christi here in Wichita to launch the International Family Medicine Fellowship. The inaugural class began in 2008 and has made an unprecedented impact in rural Kansas and around the world. Dr. Stephens took a 1-year unpaid sabbatical from Via Christi to teach full-time at a medical school in Mauritania, a French-speaking country in Northwest Africa with zero family medicine history or infrastructure. He was personally invited to join their faculty by the dean and met with the Minister of Health multiple times to discuss plans for future postgraduate training in family medicine to meet the needs of the many underserved rural areas of that country. As the director of the International Family Medicine Fellowship Program at Via Christi, Dr. Stephens traveled extensively to identify partner sites in Africa for the program. Additionally, he travels abroad to teach CME courses to help medical missionaries maintain their life support certifications on site. Dr. Stephens seeks to meet the needs of the underserved patients internationally and also to serve his neighbors within the borders of the United States. His impact on the lives of people around the world through his service, as well as the ongoing work of the fellows he has trained, is simply incalculable. Dr. Stephens, it is with great pleasure that I present you with this award, the 2019 Kansas Humanitarian Award.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you to all the officers, board, and staff of the KAFP. I'm really honored to be here tonight. I'm grateful to be the recipient of this. I'm surprised that I received this. I would like to just introduce my family. My wife and most of my family can't be here. They're at a wedding and a family reunion in Washington, D.C. So I'm really joined by one family member, my daughter Sarah, and, and my brother Mark Stephens, his wife Janita.
Yeah!
My family asked me, what is a humanitarian award? And I actually had trouble defining this for them. I actually looked at the Cambridge Dictionary definition, and it said that a humanitarian is a person who is involved in the connectedness with improving people's lives and reducing suffering. Therefore, all of you are recipients of this award tonight. But I guess implied in this is the fact that I've been involved in international work. I looked at the recipients, and 4 of the 5 I know well from having had been recognized for their international efforts. So if it's true, if you're honoring me for my international work, thank you. If I'm wrong, would somebody please correct me, because all of my comments hence are tied to that. It's good. So born and raised in Mineola, Kansas, the son of Dr. Charles Stephens, the nephew of G. Gale Stephens, the brother of Mark Stephens, all family physicians. I tried not to be, but that's another story. So how do you get from rural Kansas, narrow view, to having a global interest? As a second-year medical student, a fourth-year mentor of mine said, Todd, when you get to your 4th year, you're going to have some elective time. I think you should consider taking an elective at a mission hospital overseas. So I gave that 0 thought. There I was, my 4th year, making out my schedule, and this guy's admonition came back to me. I called him. I said, Bruce, where did you go? He said, Rwanda. This is before the genocide. I honestly asked him, what continent is that? That was my geographical acumen. But 9 months later, there I was, descending through the clouds over Kigali, Rwanda, en route to a 2-month health walk that literally changed the trajectory of my life. I had never been outside of the country. I'd never really seen poverty. I worked in the shadow of a missionary doctor, a surgeon from Grand Rapids, Michigan, who'd been there 27 years, Dr. Al Snyder. There was nothing that he could not do. I marveled at the way he took care of orthopedics and GYN and urology, everything, and he did it with excellence. But I also remember his gentleness. That had not been modeled to me in medicine yet. That really stood out to me. And his love for the Rwandan people. And I just came home changed. It was as if I came home with a new pair of glasses on, and the world had changed to me, and I changed to the world. But something else, I brought home another thing. I brought home a package. While I was sitting in the airport in Kigali, Rwanda, ready to catch my flight, a middle-aged couple came up to me, introduced themselves, said they, quote, heard I was in the country. And, are you Todd Stephens? Yes. Are you from Kansas? Yes. Wichita? Yes. Would you be so kind, like our daughter is back at Wichita State University getting her teaching certificate. Would you mind carrying a package back to her? So I did. Those of you who traveled internationally know that you're really a pack mule for everybody's mail. So I put in on my other 100 things. And I married her a year and a half later. It was a total setup. I made out like a bandit, but I do have to go through life knowing that I was duped, and that's humbling. But that experience really did solidify my decision to pursue family medicine. I was going into OBGYN, but I really realized that a well-trained family physician is the best doctor to take care of the most patients and do it with excellence in that environment. I also returned asking a lot of existential questions, like, what is God asking of me? Like, what does he expect of me? And it sent me on a bit of a search. And I was surprised to find that Christ was not silent on this issue. There were over 400 verses that I discovered that talk about God's heart for those living on the margin, and explicitly listed those for whom we are responsible to care for, like the widow, the orphan, those who are naked, those who are hungry, the prisoner, the sick, the immigrant and refugee living in our midst. I was blown away when I realized this. So the rest of the story is, I married that girl. We went back as second-year residents, really to confirm, is this for us as a team now? I graduated, and I headed to the underserved community of Johnson County. I got a lot of ribbing for that, being the missionary guy. After that, we did a year of French language study in Quebec, and I did 6 months of tropical medicine in Belgium. And then we headed overseas, first to Kenya and then to Rwanda. Took 2 children with me, delivered number 3 in Kenya, number 4 in Rwanda. That time was one of the busiest and most fulfilling of my life. I was doing things that were much beyond my breadth of care. I won't go into tonight, but I really saw the impact of a family physician taking really good care of a large population. And we came home after passing on the baton to 4 Rwandan doctors that we helped to recruit. And we were asked to then re-up to go to Mozambique. And something about that didn't strike us, new language, just a lot of inertia. So I went home to practice in my hometown for a season to help my father kind of ostensibly move to retirement. That was very slow, but I was delighted to practice rural Kansas medicine. I loved it. After a few years, Via Christi called. My brother Mark was on faculty at Via Christi, and Dr. Lou, the director, said, hey, we have an idea. We have some residents that kind of floated the idea of an international fellowship program. We need a director. We don't know anything about this. Would you come? So after wrestling with that, we decided, yes, we would come. So came in 07, launched it in 08. We've had 34 fellows through this international fellowship program. 17 of those are actually serving full-time overseas right now. And we have 2 or 3 that are teed up to go within the next few months. Places like Zambia, like Uganda, like Burundi, North Africa, Chad, Egypt, India, Honduras, Guatemala, Iraq. So it's been really exciting for me to see our graduates going and making a big difference in some very difficult and dark places. As part of this fellowship, they all are required to provide locum tenens coverage. So this is part of our sustainable funding idea. So they serve rural Kansas, and every fellow actually provides 400 hours of locums coverage. We have served 16 communities in western Kansas, about 11,600 hours to date. Most of those are critical access hospitals. 8 of those communities have successfully recruited our fellows. So we essentially have 7 or 8 of them that are out practicing in rural Kansas. So we realize that the line between rural medicine and international medicine is really a thin gray one, as you're dealing with a lot of the same issues of low resources, low personnel resources, lack of specialists, too many patients. So a lot of the things require a breadth of care. So it's been a great fit, and it's been a great privilege of my life to have been a part of a program like this that's serving in rural Kansas and overseas. Well, lastly, let me just finish with a story from North Africa. I really want to thank Dr. Dooley and Via Christi for allowing me the privilege to take an unpaid sabbatical year last year. This was a bit out of the box for me. We traveled to North Africa, country of Mauritania, Islamic Republic of Mauritania. We had been wanting to cultivate, there's a group of family physicians that is interested in the expansion of global family medicine. We meet at the AAFP Global Health Summit, and we have been interested in getting it established in French-speaking West Africa, where it isn't. There are some nascent family medicine residency programs in East Africa, in English-speaking Africa, none in French-speaking. So we put Mauritania on our map, and we have gone in 2 or 3 times trying to cultivate the ground. It's all about relationships and developing trust. We provide CME. We try to connect with medical students, with the dean, with faculty, and the Minister of Health. So, in one of these visits, the Minister of Health turned to me and said, would you ever consider coming back and being a visiting professor? I took him up on that. I think he was shocked, but I took him up on that. So we went last year. As I was teaching first and second year medical students, whatever, serving the dean, however he needed served, it was part-time, so I started looking for medical outlets. And I started working in some health clinics in some shanty towns of the capital city and started covering for a colleague in the interior, but I started working for a prison ministry called NORA. NORA was started by an American about 10 years before I got there. The American was martyred by Islamic extremists. He was doing really good work in the country, attempted kidnapping. Well, I guess what struck me about that is his widow stayed in the country, kept working, and actually his father took over the head of this NGO and continued to work in the country. So they asked me while I was there, would you be willing to kind of work as a medical director? So I did. That was very eye-opening for me. They have 3 prisons in the capital city, medium security, a women's prison, and a maximum security prison called Darnaim. Darnaim is where most of the Islamic extremists are held. And I would work there 1 day a week. I saw unspeakable things in that prison. just amputations from restraints left on too long, and feet that were beaten with an iron rod because somebody tried to escape, and women that had been raped and now pregnant but were put in prison as the guilty party, and just terrible things, sex trafficking. It was a dark, dark place. But I felt like this was a place where light really shines. So I treated them with dignity. You know, I looked them in the eyes. I spoke their name. I shook their hand. Tried to connect with them personally. Just treating them with dignity before we started consulting on them. Many of them have been thrown in on trumped-up charges. A lot of the victims of racism. But I only share that because I had a second-year medical student in my house for dinner one night, and I was explaining that I'd started working with Nora in the prisons, and he was like, "Professor, no, don't do that. Like, don't do what? Don't work in the prisons. Don't do that. It's just, trust me, don't do it." I was really shocked, but we let it lie. I walked him back to the main road later that evening, and he picked it up again. Did you hear me? Really, don't work in the prisons. And I was like, Alpha, Muhammad Alpha, why? And he said, you must know that in Mauritania, we don't consider prisoners human. They are, in fact, animals. Nobody pays attention to prisoners. So I was able to share with him that because a Christ follower, that every human is actually born and given the dignity because they're made in the image of God. And as a follower, I'm actually explicitly commanded to take care of the prisoner. And he was very bewildered by that, almost to the point of silence. But I share that story because Christ admonished us that we should let our light so shine before others that men will see your good works and thereby glorify your Father in heaven. And I find it interesting that Nora is an Arabic word that means light. So every time that you and I take care of the least of these, those that live on the margin of our society, that have no voice, no power, are victimized, cannot possibly pay us back. I feel like in that moment, our light shines brightly. And actually, the darker the darkness, the brighter our light shines. Very thankful for the movement towards social determinants of health, and what I see in this millennial generation, which is a generation of mercy and justice. I feel like you're going to lead us well, this next generation. But just want to encourage all of us to be cognizant of this, to move into the areas that are dark, because our light shines brightly, and we as family physicians are in a perfect position to be that light. So thank you for this awesome award tonight and for listening to my story.